desktop artist. Let me see if somebody else is trying to pop in. That's the only thing you cannot co-host these, so I have to go back here. But you will be able to present, assuming. So I'm going to just start. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Pam Barbie, the chair of graphic design department here at Pennsylvania College of Art and Design. So thank you for joining us for our very first visual, no pressure here, Shivani, no virtual artist presentation. And so I'd like to introduce Shivani. I'm going to mess her name, Parasnis. Get this, a biotechnologist turned MFA design graduate. We're going to have to find out about that, from MICA in Baltimore. She's specializing in bold and spirited typography, print design, and type design. And our buddy James Marshall wants to highlight him. He's here. Hi, James. She grew up in Mumbai, India, and moved to the United States a few years ago. She landed an internship with Pentagram in New York and made an impression very quickly after graduation to obtain a position at Spotify. She's received numerous awards and has been featured in many publications. Some of the awards, the Community Fund recipient for the Adobe Creative Residency, the Certificate of Typographic Excellence from the Type Directors Club, and let someone else in, and the One Club for Creativity, the ADC Young Ones winner. The list goes on. Top Talent in Adobe Design Achievement Award, the Flux Design Competition winner from AIGA Blue Ridge, which is in Baltimore. Is that in Baltimore? Blue Ridge?
I think it's the DMV area, so it's Baltimore.
Yeah. So without further ado, please, just everyone, let's give her a shout out. Welcome, and thank you, Shivani. The screen is yours.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, Pam. I'm so happy to be here again. To talk about how I was sort of there at PCA&D physically last year, and then I was invited to talk this year. So it's all exciting. So I'm quickly going to share my screen so we can start. Okay, awesome. Can you all see this?
It's coming up.
It's coming up.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Can you all see this? Are we good to start?
Conversation design and other banter.
Yes, absolutely. So I thought of keeping my conversation with you guys very casual today. So I just don't want this to be, me sharing my portfolio, but also taking you guys on a journey that I was part of. So making the switch from biotechnology to graphic design and looking back at the work I did through grad school, out of grad school, all of that. So as you guys already know, and thanks for the wonderful introduction, Pam. My name is Shivani Parasnis, and I'm a graphic designer and typographer from Mumbai. And 2 years ago, I actually moved from Mumbai to a small city, Baltimore. Small relatively, because Mumbai is probably 10 times New York. So it was quite a bit of a cultural and environmental shock for me. But I think these 2 years in Baltimore have made me something that I couldn't have imagined to have become if I wasn't in the States. So a quick recap to what happened before I came to MICA. So as Pam pointed out, I was actually a biotechnologist. So these are just some really old, embarrassing pictures of what my life looked like before I came to MICA. So the picture on the right, if you actually see, that's what my Snapchat looked like. So I'm sure like a lot of people here will be like rolling their eyes at this and they'll be like, oh my God, this is so nerdy. But this is basically what my life was. I used to be in the lab. I was working with a lot of fungi and bacteria, and I was loving it. So I did my undergrad and I went to grad school. So that's 5 years of studying biotechnology. And I think during that process, I never really felt that I was doing something wrong or something that I did not enjoy. But I think at the end of my master's, just like this chemical reaction on the screen, I really felt stuck. So it was either doing a PhD, which felt very heavy and I was genuinely scared to pursue that, or it was, taking into account something that I haven't done before and looking at other options. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a year off and see what I can do with my career that's not related to science. So on the side, I think I had been doing lettering, calligraphy, hand lettering, all of those things since I was in the 6th grade. So that was something I think I was doing very subconsciously, and it was more of a stress relief for me, you know. So I would spend the entire day working in the lab and then come home and sort of release that pressure off of my head and just sit down and letter something. And even though I wasn't a full-fledged letterer at that time, and it was just a hobby, I really enjoyed sort of looking at the processes involved. So I would like do these time-lapse videos, and I would really enjoy all of those things. So fast forward to now, not that old, guys, not 75 years later, but for exaggeration. So fast forward to now, this is me outside MICA. So I knew that I had to take this liking for art and design that I already had somewhere deep down in me and try to see if I could pursue that full time. So when actually Pam approached me to and invited me to speak at PCA, I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? This is, I mean, there's so many things going on in my head. But then I think I knew deep down that I wanted to share my journey with everybody else as much as I enjoyed sharing my work. So this was actually a DM that I received on Instagram, I think many, many months ago. And she just said, hello, I just wanted to say that I find your work really amazing. Also wanted to thank you for not deleting your really old posts. It's really nice to see a person's growth, and it helps newbies like us not freak out about being the absolute best. And I'm like, that is what I want to talk about. So it's a lot of times, I think, when we see the work that's already put out there, we see the final result, and we don't see the process and where that person actually began. So for this presentation, I told myself, okay, I'm going to show you guys good work, obviously, but I'm also going to show you where I started and some of the not so good work, you know, that got me to where I am today. So believe it or not, 3 years ago, this is what I used to do. So this is what I used to make 3 years ago. And I was so proud of myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not a designer and I'm making all these things in Photoshop. And it was, I think, from that stage, my liking for design and letter forms in general began. But I knew that without a formal education in this field, I would not be able to sort of take these things, be a gold digger and make something and work for a company that I really look up to. So throughout that time and the 2 years of MICA, I think I came to realize that there are certain things and certain common threads throughout my work that sort of keep me grounded and define what I love doing the most. So the first is culture. And the second is letters, obviously, because I've literally grown up drawing letters, and then it transitioned into a more formal craft of calligraphy. And between those two, where the two meld, I think that's where all the good stuff is. That's where the good stuff happens. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. So I thought of sharing my learnings with all of you guys and try to make this as relatable as possible and guide you in a way to, I mean, not guide you maybe, but I think find a good way to showcase what you have and what shines within you. So the first part I noticed about myself is that I love holding on to my culture, and everyone's experiences, the memories they have, the moments they share with other people are very, very unique to them. So find those moments and bring them into your work, because I think that is what will make your work original and authentic to yourself. So the first project that I want to talk about along these lines is the Mumbai Art Deco project. So this project began as an exercise in grad school. I think this was my second or the third project in the grad school. So still pretty new to graphic design at that point. And I come from Mumbai, as I mentioned earlier. And Mumbai has a very rich history of Art Deco architecture, which I actually did not know about until I left Mumbai. So there's so many things that I learned about my own background, about my own history after I came to the States. And I said, okay, so the practice, the assignment was to design 7 different posters, 1 poster a day, along any one theme or any one project that you want to focus on. So I was scrolling through Instagram and trying to see if I can find really good Art Deco buildings in Mumbai, and I came across the work of this really beautiful photographer in Mumbai. His name is Kuber Shah, and he takes these really gorgeous pictures of exclusively of Art Deco buildings in Mumbai. So I casually wrote him a message. I said, "Hey Kuber, I have this project in mind, and would you be willing to collaborate with me in any way? Even if that means just giving me the pictures that you've already clicked and me making something out of it." And he's like, "Yeah, man, we should totally do this." So that sort of kickstarted my first collaboration ever. And I started seeing how I could discover different styles, if I could incorporate motion into it in some way. But then it all sort of came down to being simple, having that minimal aesthetic that my work always had. And the end result was this. So the poster that you see on the left is actually an illustration of the building on the right. It's an old movie theater in Mumbai called Eros Theater. And I added little tidbits of information just above the name of the theater that would tell you more about the building. And we created 7 different posters with 7 different pictures that he gave me. And all of them were unique to themselves, So the structure of the building, the colors, all of that seemed very vibrant and true to its era. So that whole process was extremely interesting. And the funniest bit was all of this was done in 2 weeks. So it was a fast-paced project, but extremely interesting. And I think when I was trying to upload my work online, the best way to do that is by taking the work from where it's come from. So Kuber and I actually went back, and he sent me some pictures of the streets of Mumbai that he had clicked. And we started mocking up these posters in those streets of Mumbai. So it's sort of, giving back to the city, what inspired us to start this whole project. And I think we had an exhibition at the end of it, and it made it to the newspaper. So all in all, I think very early in grad school, I realized that this is something that is definitely unique to me, and I love telling people about it. So yeah, this was the first project. Another project was called Ya Jule. This was a project that I think I completed very recently, so probably a couple of months ago. So Adobe approached me for their community residency, and they said, "Okay, we just want you to create 3 posters, 3 artworks. The theme subject can be anything you want. All you have to do is use the beta version of Illustrator for iPad." So I said, "Okay, this is fun. Let's sort of, go back down my memory lane and see what I can work with." So 3 years ago, not 3, oh my God, it was 5 years ago. 2015 seems like 3 years ago. I don't know why. So in 2015, I actually traveled to the northernmost state in India called Jammu and Kashmir. And it's on the border of China. And it's a really, really beautiful state that thankfully not a lot of people actually travel to. So it's untouched in that way. And the culture and the vibrancy and the colors that you see within the Ladakhi culture is it's very something that we haven't seen before. So I said, okay, let's sort of go back and see these pictures and see how we can work with them. So I decided to create 3 illustrations, which would in turn become 3 posters, and they would all be based on the culture that Ladakh, which is a state in Jammu and Kashmir, what would that sort of look like? So I had really bad pictures that I clicked back in the day, and looking back through them was very interesting because I felt like a lot of things had changed. And it's like, when you see old pictures, you're like, oh my God, I was a totally different person 5 years ago. And I said, okay, these are the 3 pictures that I'm going to take from what I captured back then and start working on illustrations. So this is a quick time lapse showing you how my process began. So a lot of the work that I do has a lot of vibrant colors. It's based on symmetry, grids, minimalism. So I knew that I had to incorporate that aesthetic into my work and showcase my skills on Illustrator for iPad, which I think is a really great tool. And I'm really thankful that I got to use it and experiment with it. And the result was these 3 posters.
Wow.
So each poster talks about one element that I saw in the Ladakhi culture. And my friend who actually lives in Ladakh, she was kind enough to go to monasteries, speak to monks, and get the significance of each of these elements. So all of the posters had the illustration, obviously, but then what it's called right under it, what it's called in the Tibetan script, and a short blurb that explained the significance of that illustration. So if you print out this poster and give it to somebody, they'll know what exactly I'm talking about. And yeah, so this was my second, I think one of the most favorite projects I've done so far. And you'll hopefully be able to see it on Adobe's platform, Instagram, somewhere very soon.
Yeah.
So this was all about culture. Part 2 that I realized, this was after I came to grad school, was try finding a skill you enjoy the most and work till you get good at it. It's that simple. So when I came to MICA, I was extremely intimidated by the fact that I was the only non-designer amidst all of these people who have been studying design for 4 or 5 years before me. Some of them already had their own studios. So thinking about what I want to focus on and what I want to get better at, I think that answer came to me very naturally. And it's going back to the idea of calligraphy and hand lettering that I'd been doing for so long. So for my thesis year at MICA, which was last 2019 to 2020, I worked on the extra bold italic type Foundry. And I took that original skill that I had of drawing letters, doing calligraphy, and expanding that skill set and venturing into type design, which is something I had never done before. So we had one elective at MICA that taught type design. And that was practically it. Like one semester, I had to learn everything I could and then work on my thesis, heads down. And the result was these 4 typefaces. So the core idea of the thesis was to look at the binaries in typeface design. And when I talk about binaries, I mean, when we think of, say, a serif versus a non-serif, a sans serif, it's like I'm forgetting what typography is suddenly. But talking about serif versus sans serif, so these are the binaries, right? So there are 2 extremes. But what about all the little things you see between those 2 extremes? So this is just one set. There are so many others. There could be Roman versus italic. If there is a standard idea of stress, so like the verticals should always be thicker than the horizontals, sort of challenging and breaking those 2 binaries in typeface design, and designing typefaces outside of that idea was the whole project. And for me, creating visual forms using those typefaces, not just as type specimens, but also sort of an environment in which the posters could live in, was very, very important to me. So at every stage, I think the minute I had a decent sized group of letters that could spell something that meant something, I would instantly start making posters, vinyl covers, little cards, absolutely anything that, seemed right for that particular typeface. And so it was the same idea of looking at how binary typeface design is, that you make a typeface and make a specimen and you sell it. But what if you have fun with your own typefaces and create an aesthetic that you want people to sort of use, and you want your typeface to live in that environment was the whole idea. And a day before, so our thesis show got cancelled, right? Thanks to COVID. But literally a week before school closed down, I decided to create a zine that would sort of house all of my typefaces, but also, sort of trying to go beyond that usual idea of just me making stuff that I have done, and I made the posters, I printed the zine. I didn't want that. So a day before school closed down, I managed to reso print a 30-page publication, which was, reso printing is my absolute favorite medium. And that is again another thing that I learned when I came to MICA. And what I did for the zine was that I gave my typefaces to 10 of my friends and designers that I knew in and out of MICA, and asked them to design absolutely anything they wanted. So there was no constraint on the subject or the theme. They could do anything they want. And I combined all of those things into one 30-page publication, which you see in front of you right now. And finally, I think the fruit of the lockdown was our thesis books. And that, I think the thesis book is so crucial and important to each of us is because it houses all of the work that we did over the last 1 year, including a 5-page essay talking about the processes and challenges we faced, what we made, and how we delivered it to everybody. And I think this was another challenge for me in my career because I am really bad with publication design. Like, I had not done publication design ever. So designing a 150-page book in lockdown by yourself I was terrified before I started this project. But I think the same ideology that I used for designing posters and everything else sort of trickled into my processes for this project. And it turned into, I think, one of my most favorite tangible things to own today. So it feels weird to just talk about my thesis in 5 slides. Like, that is it's something I'm doing for the first time. But yeah, hope you all got the gist of that project. Mm-hmm. And talking along the same lines of, developing a skill or advancing a skill that you already have, I was this project called Yoboseo Namaste. So Yoboseo means hello in Korean and Namaste means hello in Hindi. And for this project, I again decided to collaborate with 2 of my Korean classmates, Soyeon and Sora. And I wanted to create something that was bilingual and sort of based on the idea that cultures and people share a commonality despite the country you're in, despite the language you speak. And for this project, all I told Sora and Soyeon was, you know what, send me any picture that you have that you clicked in Korea before you came to MICA that has letters on it. And this is what they sent me. So they sent me this huge Google Drive dump with around 70 to 80 images of literally anything. So there were billboards, signboards, food packages, visiting cards, whatever you could think of. And I said, okay, this is going to be a lot of fun. So I decided to make 3 posters based on the images they had sent me. And the core idea was to find a commonality with what they were showing me versus what I grew up with. So the first poster was this visiting card that Soyeon gave me from a market in South Korea. And what you see below it is actually a fish market in Mumbai. So trying to find common threads and putting it all together in one cohesive frame with typography, illustrations, all of that. And it all turned into something really interesting. And I decided to make it bilingual. And what you see, what the outcome was, is what you see on the right. And in the series, I think we continued finding that same theme, is to take what Sora Soyeon gave and to find an analogical picture from Mumbai or India, any place in India, and see how we can put those two together. So the second one was a street in Korea, and a very, very crowded street in Mumbai. It's like you don't see anybody in the picture above, and then there's like millions of people in the picture in Mumbai. That's literally how Mumbai is. But taking the signboards that you see outside of shops and creating an interesting composition was what you see on the right, the poster. So it has Hangul typography, which is the script for Korean, and there's English and there's Hindi, all of which I think melded and blended really well. And it was really interesting to see, even though the cultures and the type is so different, it all sort of comes together so seamlessly. And the final poster in the series was about food. This was, I think, a picture that Sora clicked of a restaurant, and it was a very simple idea of how Indians eat food with their hands and Koreans eat food with chopsticks, and sort of putting that in one frame and drawing inspiration from the letter forms that were on the picture that Sora sent resulted in this. And these are all the posters together. And I think the one thing I learned after this project ended was how much I love the idea of collaboration. And while you are in grad school, I think you have that opportunity, or art school even, is to work with designers who have such very different styles and such different backgrounds that you have to do something with that pool of knowledge that you get when you're in art school. And I love that so much. So how are you feeling? How's everybody feeling so far?
We're good. I mean, this is great. Seniors, you're taking this in. Think about thesis. I'm just saying thesis. I'm thinking. I hope you're all thinking too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an ongoing thought. Like, it has to be at the back of your mind.
Yeah.
So moving forward, finally, I learned that grad school life while you're in grad school is great. But when I think I interned at Pentagram, and there was a short 3-month period when I had to think about how things are outside of art school. I mean, when you're in art school, you have a lot of support, and you have a lot of things that you want to do, and you have the bandwidth to do projects that are so close to you and you love. But the real challenge, I think, begins when you leave art school and try to work in the real world. And this is something I think I have held on to, is to meld your likes with what you seek outside of your art school life. And this can be difficult initially, because you're not going to instantly, say, oh, I like animation and this is the style that I want, and you're going to get a job that's perfectly fits that criteria immediately. But I think always staying grounded to what defines you and moving forward with that is, I think, one mantra that I really hold on to. So the first project under this category that I want to share is something that I completed probably a couple of weeks ago. So it's called Friends, and it's actually an EP cover design that I did. So these guys, so Parikh and Singh are the two guys you see in the pictures. They are an indie band in India, and 4 or 5 years ago they launched their first song, and I have been listening to their music ever since. It's really moody and beautiful, and I genuinely like their visual aesthetics along with the music they create. So they have this whole Wes Anderson-y vibe going on with all of their pictures and just everything they do. I love looking at the videos they make, the music videos for their songs and all of that. So it was just, I knew that at some point in my career, I have to work for them and make something for them. So they posted this picture on their Instagram, right? On February 19th. And desperately, like in all caps, I was like, can I please design an album cover for you guys? And this one friend of mine, who actually, he's a photographer, and he actually did a couple of commissions for the two of them. He backed me up and they were like, oh, you should hire her. You will not be disappointed. So I'm like, oh my God, thank you, Zishan. This is what I need right now. And surprisingly, like out of the blue, this was totally unexpected. I got a message from them saying, hi Shivani, we are actually releasing some new music and we're working on something really cool. And we would love for you to design the covers. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is it. So I have my Zoom call with Parekh, right? Like one of the band members. And this is what his brief is. I want something moody, colorful, and mysterious, like a flower against the night sky. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, I haven't heard the music yet, but I know what exactly they're going for in terms of everything that they have designed so far and the kind of music they make. So Parekh was like, I'll send you maybe a couple of songs we're working on. And I said, cool. So I did not, and he sent me a Pinterest board, which had these pictures of Polaroids of like a girl holding up a flower against the night sky. And I said, okay, we're not going to be this literal. But again, this was when I think I thought of how I want to take my aesthetic and sort of trickle it into what they want. And this was the first draft I sent them. So it's handwritten. The name of the album is Friends. So it's handwritten. And it's a flower against maybe not the night sky, but an evening sky. And for the first time in my life, I mean, I've worked on a lot of commission projects. And I think this was a project when they were like, we love this and let's move forward. That's it. No feedback. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And then originally the idea was to just design one cover. But we ended up designing 5 different covers for the 5 songs in the EP. And we extended that language that we had already established by taking a flower and sort of trying to relate it to the mood of the song that they were singing about. So it was Lonely Weather was a little droopy, sad little flower. Mistress Anxiety was contrasting colors, really heavy on the eyes with like these pointy flowery things. I don't know, I came up with imaginary flowers for this. And then The Things was another song which was a duet between Parekh and another woman. So we had 2 petals instead of flowers. So this is how it all came together. And the final cover for the EP looked like this. So it was all of the 5 songs and the 5 flowers sort of staying and living in this one space. And we looked at some mock-ups for vinyls and EPs that they would design in the future. And this project is yet to be released. So you guys are the first ones to get an exclusive sneak peek at this whole process. I don't know when they're planning to, because they were planning to do this before COVID struck. So it has been going on for a while now. So I don't know when the music is actually going to be out, but whenever you do, if you see it, please let me know what you think. Yeah. And finally, stepping into the real world. So grad school came to an end in May, and I was like, okay, now I need to start looking for jobs. So looking back at where I came from. So before I came to MICA, I think I worked at a studio in Mumbai called Deco, which is one of the leading graphic design studios. And I'm still surprised how I actually got in, because I had nothing to show Lokesh, Lokesh is the design director. And he was the one who sort of agreed to mentor me and teach me everything I knew before I came to MICA. So that 1 year of working at Deco and learning on the job was crucial. The second learning was the biggest learning, I think, was Pentagram last year. So I worked in Abbott Miller's team, and I got to work on publication projects, branding projects, I think online social media campaigns, quite a lot of stuff for 3 months. I think through all of these experiences, I try to figure out what I love the most. And that is what brought me to Spotify, is going back to the same idea of finding what you love doing and seeking those same opportunities in the real world. And once again, people send me messages on Instagram. And I got this message, like, must be nice working at Spotify. What kind of work are you on over there? So Spotify is a big company, right? There are 5,000 employees. And I my interview process with Spotify actually went on for 3 whole months. So I graduated in May. My first interview with them was on May 18th, and I actually joined the company on July 13th. So there are multiple teams within Spotify that control different operations campaigns going on across their brand. And I joined the brand and creative team that is an in-house agency of 15 to 18 designers, more or less. And I joined that team, and I'm working on 4 or 5 projects that you'll eventually see across Spotify eventually. So the first project I think that I started working on was called the Civic Engagement Campaign. It sounds heavy, but guys, it was the elections project. So what Spotify decided to do this year was use the whole database of the listeners that they have and encourage them to register to vote the coming election season. And the campaign was called Play Your Part. So when you go to vote, after you vote, you're given this I voted sticker, right? So we sort of decided to hold on to that idea of a sticker and created this huge set of stickers that we would use as part of the campaign. So Spotify has obviously a lot of brand guidelines, but I think one of the best things is being able to use an array of colors that are within the brand guidelines, which give us the flexibility to create work that seems fresh and new, even though we are using the same typeface and the same colors every single time. And we started making these visuals, billboards, banners, what you would see in the app. So say you're listening to Billie Eilish's song, you would get a quick little message saying, hey, you love the song, but have you thought of registering to vote yet? And the whole idea was to team up with first-time voters, like artists who are first-time voters, so that they can encourage their listeners who could also be first-time voters, like a lot of you guys maybe, who are listening today, to register and vote. So the whole idea of the first phase of this campaign was to get as many registrations as possible. So we teamed up with an external site called Ballot Ready and Headcount, who will help you register to vote this season. And it will all happen through the hub, which is on Spotify's. If you open the app, go to the browse section, you'll see a separate category called Play Your Part that tells you everything you need to know about registration. And along with that, I think you can also look at podcasts or listen to songs that are along the same theme and that can sort of encourage and motivate you to go and vote this season. And we were looking at how we could animate these. So these were a bunch of share cards and ads that you would see across Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. And I think looking back at the work I used to do before coming to Spotify, when I saw the design language for this project, I'm like, this is totally up my alley. Like, this is so much fun. And I think that excitement and passion to work on something that you love so much was what I love doing and that's what I love, I think, about being a graphic designer. And apart from that, I really wish I could show you a lot of the other projects, but these are some things that I'm doing on which I'm not allowed to share yet because it hasn't been launched. But I'm also redesigning a playlist cover. I'm working on Spotify's biggest annual campaign called Rap 2020, which I'm sure a lot of you guys who use Spotify might be aware of it. And it sort of recaps your listening experience throughout the year of 2020 and presents you with an experience that will tell you how many hours you streamed some music, which was the top artist you listened to, and all of that. So I'm working on that. And most importantly, having fun at Spotify. So I think in conclusion, my biggest learning through these 3 years of graphic design was that you should never stop creating, because there was a lot of stuff that I did outside of school in my free time. So a lot of these posters that you see are posters that I made in my free time. And a lot of it sort of made its way into my portfolio and got me to where I am today. So I know it might feel very difficult to be productive when you're home during a lockdown, and I can totally relate to art school being, I mean, it feels funny, right? You're in art school and you should be making things with your hand in a studio, but you can't because COVID. But I think even outside of that, just to push yourself to do things that you are already good at and seeing where it takes you is the biggest learning that I have to share with you guys. So that's all I have today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, I know this is just like, I don't know what to say, but gosh, wow, you have such a positive attitude and energy that, like, here you are working for Spotify till June. Listen to this, who haven't heard this, June 2021. They're staying inside. They're not meeting at work. And where do you get your inspiration? Like, how do you get excited about it when you're in the same spot? Like, oh, Spotify, like forever.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky, but it's also, I think one thing that I have learned through this lockdown period is to constantly not just find new work that you like, but also sit down and study it. So I reached out to a lot of designers, not just for internships or jobs, but just, to sort of talk to them and say, hey, I really love your work. Can you tell me how you did this? So just, I think, connecting with fellow designers and seeing what inspires them, I think, and creating what you have already with you. So a lot of these projects that I showed you guys today were based on images, memories, things that I've already seen in my life. And I think I realized the value of those things when they were taken away from me, right? So things that we take for granted on a daily basis, like your commute to work or your commute to school, those things can dictate so many things that trickle into your work unknowingly. And you will realize that these things go away when you're at home all the time. So looking back at what you have already and finding newer ways to work with all of that information, I think that is what is keeping me inspired these days.
Oh, no. And some questions. Anybody else have some questions for Shivani?
Oh, I see something in the chat.
What ways have you found to collaborate, even through lockdown, formally and informally? Good question, Jen. Thanks. That's great.
I think it's so right now, I think throughout grad school, I was in that comfort zone of reaching out to people I know. But very recently, I have actually been reaching out to people through Instagram. As I said, Instagram is literally like I'm there all the time. And I'm constantly looking at people's work, what they are doing. And I'm actually working the Adobe project that I showed you guys, the Yajule project. That was also an informal collaboration because I did not know anything about the Ladakhi culture apart from what I had seen. So the pictures that I had clicked there and, the videos that I had on my phone weren't enough to sort of tell me how I should steer the project in one direction. But a lot of my friends actually sent me messages saying, oh, I have a friend who can help you out with all of that information. And they were people I have never spoken to before and never interacted with. But I think everybody has become so much more humble and grateful during this lockdown. Is that idea of collaboration and just willing to help you out with what you need. I think that was one of the biggest exciting things I got to know about collaboration this year, is to reach out to people even if you don't know them, and you never know what exciting, surprising things you might get out of it. So send emails, send messages without feeling any shyness because it's just going to lead to better things and new learnings.
That's so true. Jessica Adanek, our Dean of Students, has a question for you. What is the next evolution in your work? Thank you.
Ooh, that is a tough one. So actually, since I started working at Spotify, my personal work hasn't gotten enough attention because I've been working like crazy. And even though the work-life balance is pretty good at Spotify, I think there are days when obviously there are tighter deadlines, so I'm working till like really late. But I think looking forward in that direction of where I want to be next, I think I want to develop skills that I haven't really. So I'm still scared of, working with. So I don't, if you must have noticed, I don't do any animation at all. Like when there's animation or motion graphics involved, I'm like, okay, bye, peace out. This is not my thing. But I think looking at newer skills that could help me with my aesthetic and my work, and that's something that will help me learn more. I think that is what is my next evolution and my next step.
That's all good to hear. Like we never stop learning.
You should never stop learning.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do we have any other questions? Lockdown. We talked about lockdown. We talked about your next evolution. I don't think I missed anything else. Anybody else have a question for Shivani? Shivani. I got her name wrong. I'm so bad. Yeah. I think you said it right when you said just reach out to someone. Don't be afraid, especially now. I mean, I met you briefly last year. We had lunch and stuff, but like, hey, what do you guys have to lose? Just reach out to her and find out what happens. Look, and that's what we have today. It's not the same as having you in the building, looking at students' portfolios, but it's the best we can do right now. So, anybody else? Any questions? No, you're all so quiet. What words of wisdom can you give the seniors that I know they're anxious, they're thinking about, I know they still have all these months to graduate, but they're still thinking about getting a job. I know they are right now. I'm like, wait, you can't jump from A to Z. I told them that in class. So let's get through class, but what advice would you give them after this? Because you've kind of gone through the COVID experience, and here you're going to find a job and you got one.
I was very grateful when I got it, because I know that most companies are either not recruiting right now or they are on a hiring freeze. So I think, again, the one thing that worked for me during this lockdown was reaching out to people. So even my job at Spotify, they did not have an opening as such at Spotify when I applied, but I reached out to this one designer whose work I really, really admire. And I said, hey, can you please look at my portfolio and, if you have any pointers, advice related to what I could do, please let me know. Also, I'm interested in knowing more about Spotify. So I just put it out there. And they were really, really willing to help me out. So they wrote back to me, I think like a couple of days later, and told me whom I could get in touch with. And I think that now that people are home, I know everybody is like working probably a little extra than everybody like you would otherwise because of the lockdown. You're not really traveling, so you're saving on that time and trying to be more productive. I think people are also becoming, as I said, a little more humble. So if you have anything you want to ask people, just reach out to them. I'm not saying that it worked 100% every single time. I've had a lot of rejections, people ghosting me, not replying to my emails, or like replying back with like 2-word sentences saying, oh, we're not hiring right now, bye. But I think just to be patient and know that this is all going to, get past us very soon. I know it's kind of crazy to think that you have to be productive all the time and make really cool work, but give yourself that time. And I think use this time in the lockdown to find what you love doing the most and work on that when you can. No pressure. But I think when you get out of art school, I think all of these experiences will accumulate and help you get to where you are today. Yeah.
So, question from Kelly, fan. What was your experience at Pentagram like?
Oh, it was interesting, very interesting. So Abbott Miller, who is my Abbott Miller is my director's husband. So my director at MICA is Ellen Lupton, and Abbott is her husband. So I was actually extremely thrilled to be working at Pentagram, because when I came to grad school, I'm like, okay, I have to work at Pentagram at some point of time in my life. It's like, the ultimate goal that every graphic designer has. And I interviewed with Michael Beirut's team, Paula's team, and I got rejected. So I'm like, okay, it has to work out at some point. And luckily it worked out with Abbott Miller's team. And Abbott has two offices. The main office is in New York, and his second office, which is a smaller office, is in Baltimore. So I was actually working from the Baltimore office most of the time. And I did get to go to New York maybe a couple of times for a week or so. But it's very interesting. It's like Pentagram works like an agency with tinier studios within it. Yeah. And I think that idea is so cool because I had not seen anything like it before. Obviously, it was very, very hectic. So my work day probably began like at 9:30 in the morning and went on at least till 7:30 every day. So it was hectic, but I think the projects that I got to work on and the people that I got to work with during that tenure is something that helped me decide what I like doing. So I worked on publications, I worked on brand design, even though it wasn't from start to finish. A lot of those projects were, sort of me jumping in for a little while, helping them with something and getting off. But that whole process of to see how the whole team works collaboratively and otherwise to create such amazing work that Pentagram puts out in the world, I think that was a very big learning for me. And it was amazing otherwise.
I know they have all the partners have their own like little practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Like each partner has their own studio, but they're all also under one umbrella of Pentagram. It's very interesting to see how that works. But that was a very enriching experience, those 3 months.
Okay, question from John Hollis. When showing a portfolio, is it better to have lots of different pieces or more selective, smaller batch?
This is one thing that I think this is always a tricky question because you want to show that you can do all of these different things. But I think at the end of the day, what creates most impact, at least for me and through my experience, is showing maybe like just the number of maybe 3 or 4 projects, but they are absolutely fleshed out and ready to go. Like you are so proud of them that you don't feel the need to show them anything beyond those 4 projects. And I think having fewer projects that are absolutely polished versus 10 projects with 100 different images on each slide, it doesn't make the same impact. So if there's something as simple as a 3-piece poster that I showed you guys, something as simple as that, I think explaining the process behind how you created everything and showcasing what you already have minimally, but creating like a good impact is what I think works the best. So if you have, say, 3 or 4 projects that you are extremely happy and proud of, just show those. Don't feel like you have to show them a lot to show your skills or to sort of prove that you're good at doing something. Because if you're happy with those 3 or 4 projects, you're going to be it's going to speak for itself. The work is going to speak for itself. So yeah, definitely have fewer projects, but really good projects.
So like for our seniors moving forward, it should all be electronic at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
The old books and printouts. I was curious. That's how it's going. Any other questions from anyone? Anything for Shivani here you can think of? Thank you, John Senior there, and Kelly Fan Junior. Anyone else? You're all looking at a dear look. If not, we'll just say thank you and thanks for your time. And if you won't mind sticking around, I'll talk to you. And everyone, see you. Have a good weekend. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to stay with Shivani for a minute. And they're all leaving.
Bye.
And I will stop recording.
Yeah. Not forget.